to Schemes and Stones. I'm your host, Kyle, aka Coyote, and today we're going to help you find a keyword that you like. So we're going to be looking at each faction in one of these videos, and then talking about the 8 keywords and generally what that keyword does, and also looking at the models so you can see what they look like. This is not an in-depth look at model by model. This is a very cursory glance at it to give you an overview of if it's something you'd be interested in playing. Now, as far as the actual terminology, if you're not sure what something means, check out the notes. I have a lot of that information detailed there, or you can post a comment and we'll hopefully explain what that means. And if you're also interested in more videos like this, feel free to become a patron and throw us a few bucks to help us out make more content like this. Alright, so let's get on to the faction. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the Arcanist keywords. First off, we have Academic. This is also Academic/Elemental because they're kind of merged together. So the primary keyword theme is Scholars of Elemental Magic. In this case, Sandeep is the teacher of elemental magic, and the crew are basically his students or elemental creatures that they can summon and command. The primary ability of this keyword is called Mantra. These are auras. Whenever a friendly elemental takes a concentration action, all these mantras go off as long as they're nearby that model. So this is crazy in the sense that it does a lot of stacking effects. One elemental can do a focus, and then a model pushes, and another model takes a damage, another model heals, and all these crazy things happen when this goes off. So you need to keep your models near each other to chain these mantras. As far as the Master Sandeep, he is a summoner. He's going to be summoning Gammon onto the table, and these Gammon can merge into golems. And once summoned, he can then obey these elementals to do extra actions. Now, he's also a damage dealer. He's primarily a ranged single target and a ranged pulsar. What this means is he's mostly shooting from a distance, or he's exploding his gammon that he summons in to do pulse damage to the enemies. As far as the crew as a whole, they tend to be pretty good at killing, surviving, and moving around the table. They are primarily a mixed ranged crew, so they have both melee and ranged attacks. They are a bubble crew, at least early, and then they can spread out from there. They are pretty high complexity. They're pretty high cost because of all the summons and the various models you can bring into the game. So I wouldn't recommend them for new players, but they're definitely a crew I think once you get another crew down, you can expand into this crew. Next up, we have the Augmented keyword. This is all about big, stompy robots. Hoffman is the master of the crew, and he's an expert at being able to control and repair machinery. So he is the support master of this crew, while all the robots are doing all the damage to the enemies. As far as keyword abilities, Armor 2 is probably the most prevalent. Everything in this crew has armor, so they can be quite hard to kill if the opponent doesn't have ways to get around armor. They also have the Transfer Power ability. They are doing the short 2-inch pushes by transferring power tokens, and that is something that Hoffman generates, and these models can generate by eating scrap markers as all these power tokens. These power tokens are also super useful in the sense they can allow models to get plus flips by discarding them, or add suits to their duels by discarding them. So it makes the crew very versatile in that regard. As far as Hoffman himself, he is a healer. He is essentially spending most of his actions repairing damage to his big construct models, so it makes him even tougher to put down. He's also a force multiplier because, like I said, he's putting out these power tokens every round to improve his crew, and he's also making models fast by giving them extra AP. Particularly, he's giving his AP to bigger models that can hit really hard. As far as the crew, they are pretty great at killing, surviving, and moving. Their moving is a little weird in the sense that it's all little short inch pushes, but the crew can be very fast. As far as ranged, they're predominantly melee, but they do have ranged attacks, particularly ones to drag in the enemies into melee. They are very much a bubble crew, although they can spread out. It's just they like to be near Hoffman because of the healing and the power token system. I'd say they're a pretty low complexity crew. They are fairly moderately costed as far as buying them, but you will have to buy a bunch of guild models if you're playing as Arcanist. And I think this is a good crew for starting players, so definitely check it out. The Chimera keyword is all about beast. Marcus is a beast master, and his crew is full of deadly creatures that are found on Malifaux, or hybrid creatures that he bred and interspliced together to make these devastating monsters. And the primary ability of this crew is adaptive evolution. Models with upgrades from Marcus, which he can put on during the game, can be removed from these models to gain positives to duels and add suits to those duels as well, so it can make them more effective. As for Marcus, he is an obeyer master. He can obey friendly beasts to move and charge around the board. He is also a force multiplier. As we said, he is attaching these upgrades to his Chimera models and his beast, which gives them new abilities. Generally, it either makes them tougher or gives them some extra damage dealing options. Now, as far as the crew holistically, they are very good at killing and they're very good at moving around the board. They are almost exclusively a melee-based crew. As far as proximity, they can spread out. They don't really need to be near each other than that first turn where Marcus is throwing upgrades out. Complexity, they're probably moderate just because your models tend to die a little easy, so you need to learn how to positionally keep things safe. Cost-wise, they're moderate-costed crew. You'll want to get the various options for Beast. As far as recommended for new players, I think it's a fairly decent crew for a new player to start. You'll just have to be a little careful with your positioning, and that's something you'll have to learn. The December keyword is a cult of cannibals that all worship the tyrant December, a godlike being that is a master of frozen winds and ice and winter and that sort of thing. So as far as this crew goes, their primary mechanic is all about ice pillars. A lot of models can either create these ice pillars or use them to do unique benefits or detriments to the opponent. The keyword action that you'll see across this word is Grim Feast. These models can eat corpses to heal themselves as a bonus action. Remember the cannibals, they're eating those corpses. The master of this crew is Rasputina. She is predominantly a disabler. She summons these ice pillars, but then when models start next to them, they have to discard cards or gain slow. She's also really good at stacking slow and staggered conditions on lots of models at once. So she's really good at making the opponent very inefficient. She is a long-ranged blaster and pulser as well. She can extend her range off of these ice pillars that are nearby her, so she can have incredibly long range in applying her attacks which are hitting multiple models at once ideally. So these are blast and pulse attacks, hopefully doing a lot of damage through hitting multiple models. Now, as far as the crew itself, they are strong at disabling. They're very good at making the opponent inefficient and really have to work to do anything. As far as range, they are a mixed range crew with both melee and ranged. They can have some extremely long range models though, because a few of them are able to attack through ice pillars, so keep that in mind. As far as proximity, they tend to be somewhat spread out. They don't need to be near each other, especially with their longer ranges. As far as complexity, this is a pretty complex crew, just in the sense that it's very easy to mess up games because they're not forgiving. They're not particularly fast, holistically speaking, so you're going to have to be able to predict where the opponent's going, and you want to maximize in hitting multiple models, so not an easy crew to start with. As far as the cost of the models, it's pretty moderate costed. You're not going to have to buy a lot of extra models. As far as recommending for new players, not really, because of the complexity of the crew and how unforgiving they are. That being said, it is possible you're just going to have an uphill battle, especially at first, and especially against very aggressive crews. The Foundry keyword is all about trains and constructs. The crew is composed of constructs and cyborgs that have been built to build the rail lines of Malifaux, so you're going to see that sub-theme of trains all along it. Their primary keyword ability is Ride the Rails. Their models can jump between scrap markers, so when they normally would take a walk, they can jump quite far distances if they're going from scrap marker to scrap marker. The other big theme is scrap markers themselves. This crew has a lot of ways to get scrap markers out and get various benefits from scrap markers. The crew master, Mei Feng, is predominantly a melee damage dealer. Now, she uses a unique combo system with her abilities and triggers to do kind of I punch you, I punch you again kind of things. So she can do these, like I said, weird kind of combo things. As far as other abilities, she is also a steam venter, so she can superheat the area around her to damage enemy models, which is something you definitely want to be using. She's also highly mobile, but as far as this crew, as long as they're scrapped around, they're all pretty mobile, and she is no exception. The crew as a whole are pretty strong at killing and surviving, and moving so long as there are scrap markers around for them to jump between. The range of this crew is predominantly melee. They are a spread out crew. They don't need to be near each other, though they do get some benefits when they are nearby. They are a moderately complex crew, so pretty average, I would say. Cost-wise, they're, again, fairly average, moderately costed. As for recommending to new players, I would say, yeah, it's a fine crew to learn for new players, but I will put a small asterisk in that you will need to learn trigger timing rules because of how Mei works and how her combos work. You need to understand how those abilities stack together. The Mnsu crew is the Miner and Steamfitters Union. These are the disguised, legitimate face of the Arcanists. They are the men and women who work the soulstone mining operations to generate soulstones for humanity. The primary keyword ability of this crew is Unionized. When these models are near each other, they get plus flips to their defense and willpower duels, so it makes them fairly tough defensively speaking. They also have another ability called Grit that is found throughout the keyword. Whenever these models go to half health or less, they gain some unique ability that makes them tougher or do more damage or something of the like. The master of the keyword is Ironsides. She is predominantly a tank. She's really good at pulling in enemy models, making them attack her, and then punching them back when they attack her. She's also a fairly good damage dealer. Whenever she's doing these punchbacks, she's generating adrenaline. When she's starting near enemies, she's generating adrenaline. Adrenaline is a resource that she can then spend to hit back harder or take extra actions. Her crew as a whole is pretty strong at killing, surviving, and scheme marker removal. They are pretty much a melee crew, but they do have a couple of really good ranged abilities, including one good ranged model. They are a bubble crew as far as proximity. They definitely want to be near each other for that unionized ability. Complexity, pretty low, I would say. I don't think they're an incredibly complex crew to learn how to play. They're moderately costed, so you're going to be looking at picking up a few boxes. And I would totally recommend them for new players. I think they're a very forgiving crew because of how tough they are, and their mechanics are fairly simple overall as far as understanding how they operate. The performer keyword are all dancers, magicians, actors, actresses, and dancing constructs that come from the famous Star Theater within Malifaux. Now, behind the scenes, though, there are smugglers predominantly as they're trying to get soulstones to other factions in Earth and things like that. As far as their predominant mechanics, the crew is probably the best in the game at dropping scheme markers all over the board, and they have a number of abilities to do so and help do that. Their master is Colette. She has a lot of things she does really well. Predominantly, she is a positioner. She is probably the strongest reposition ability in the game for both friendly and enemy models. She is highly mobile because she can vanish from the board when enemies attack her and reappear next to her own models. She is a condition stacker if she wants to be. She can stack a lot of distracted on enemy models to make them very ineffective. And like all models in this crew, she's great at putting scheme markers down. So as far as the crew as a whole, they are very strong at moving, disabling, scheme marker generation, and scheme marker removal. As far as range, they're predominantly melee, but again, they do have some long range, notably the Presto Changeo ability that is really good at repositioning people. As far as proximity, they are great at spreading out. They can be all over the board and cover a lot of ground. Complexity, they're pretty moderately complex. Cost, they're moderately costed, and recommending them for new players, definitely. They are a great keyword to learn, and they'll only get better the better you get. And finally, we have the Wildfire crew. So if the Mnsu is the disguised legitimate side of the Arcanist, Karis and Wildfire are the terrorist side of the Arcanist and kind of the face of the Arcanist as seen by the public. Their primary keyword mechanic is setting things on fire and burning. They want to set everything on fire, including themselves, which they use to their advantage. Karis herself, she is a damage dealer. She's predominantly about setting things on fire and also putting out pyre markers, which when things walk through them or sit in them, they get set on fire. She's also a condition stacker, as we alluded to. She wants to just stack up the burning condition and also the injured condition, which enemies gain from these pyre markers. And that will make the models really easy to hit, so you can kill them and set them on fire as needed. As far as the crew as a whole, they're very strong at killing and moving around the board. They are a mixed range crew with both melee and ranged attacks. They are a fairly spread out crew other than starting off. They want to get their burning system set up, but after that they can go all over the board and not need to be near each other. Complexity, I would say, is fairly low. They seem like a good starting crew. Cost is fairly moderate. And again, as I said, as far as recommending for new players, definitely it is a great crew to learn with. And it's a good one to start with and then expand into, like, say, the academic keyword, because you're going to be using the same models because you have fire elementals in both. And that is the Arcanist keyword, so check them out if they sound interesting and they look good for you. If not, stay tuned for the other faction breakdowns, and hopefully you find a faction that fits your playstyle and your visual aesthetic.